Dr. Veltari looked at the holographic display showing different starships from across the galaxy. Her 4 eyes moved carefully over each design. As the head scientist of the Galactic Research Center, she had studied many alien races over the past 20 years. Today, she wanted to pick something new and interesting. "What about the humans?" asked Dr. Zixera, her young assistant. She pointed at a crude-looking metal ship on the screen. "They joined our Federation 3 years ago, but nobody has really studied their technology yet." Veltari's antenna twitched with curiosity. The humans were still new to galactic society. Most advanced races thought they were simple and backward. Their ships looked like flying metal boxes compared to the beautiful crystal vessels of the Altari, or the energy-based craft of the Void Dancers. "Interesting choice," Veltari said slowly. "Their classification report lists them as Class C civilization. Basic technology, simple weapons, nothing too special." She paused and looked closer at the human destroyer on the screen. "But that is exactly why we should study them. Sometimes the simple races have surprising solutions to complex problems." Commander Thekalon, their military expert, laughed from across the room. His scales changed color to show amusement. "Humans? They still use kinetic weapons that shoot metal bullets. My people stopped using such primitive tools 500 years ago. What could we possibly learn from them?" Engineer Kurian nodded in agreement. His mechanical arms clicked as he adjusted his research equipment. "Their engines are fusion-based. Very basic. My species mastered antimatter propulsion centuries ago. This seems like a waste of our valuable research time." But Veltari had made up her mind. Something about the humans interested her. Maybe it was how confident they seemed during diplomatic meetings, even though their technology appeared so simple. Maybe it was how other races seemed slightly nervous around them, though nobody could explain why. "We will study a human warship," she announced. "Send a request to their diplomatic representative. Ask for permission to examine one of their military vessels." The next day, Commander Lee Minho arrived at their research station. He was tall for a human, with dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to notice everything. He wore a simple blue uniform with strange symbols that Veltari didn't recognize. "Dr. Veltari," Minho said with a polite smile, "I received your request to study one of our warships. We would be happy to help with your research." Veltari was surprised by how quickly the humans agreed. Most races required weeks of negotiations before allowing outsiders to examine their military technology. "You have no concerns about sharing your defensive secrets?" Minho's smile grew slightly wider. "We believe that scientific knowledge should be shared among allies. Besides, studying our technology might help improve galactic defense systems for everyone." "What ship can you offer us?" asked Zixara, eager to begin the research. "We have recently retired the UES Indomitable," Minho replied. "She's a destroyer-class vessel about 5 years old. Standard equipment and weapons. She served with honor but was replaced by newer models last month." Theklon studied the human commander carefully. "A destroyer? That seems quite large for what your people might consider standard equipment." "Humans tend to build things sturdy," Minho said with what looked like amusement. "We believe in being prepared for unexpected situations." 3 days later, the research team traveled to the human shipyard orbiting Mars. Veltari had never been to human space before. The system looked busy with ships moving in all directions. Some were clearly civilian cargo vessels, but others had the sharp lines of military craft. The UES Indomitable was much bigger than Veltari had expected. The ship was nearly 2 kilometers long and covered in a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange antennae and weapon mounts stuck out from its hull at odd angles. It looked powerful but crude, like someone had built a fortress that could fly. Commander Park Jiwon met them at the airlock. She was shorter than Minho but had the same calm confidence that seemed common among human military officers. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable," she said. "I hope you find our ship interesting." Chief Engineer Kim Daeho joined them as they entered the ship. He was older than the other humans, with gray hair and hands marked by years of working with machinery. "She might not look pretty," he said, patting the wall affectionately, "but she's reliable. Never let us down in all her years of service." As they walked through the corridors, Veltari noticed how thick the walls were. The metal felt different under her claws, denser than normal starship materials. The humans had built this vessel like a tank that could travel between stars. "What kind of threats did this ship face during its service?" Kurian asked, running his mechanical fingers over a wall panel. "Oh, the usual stuff," Daeho replied casually. Pirates, raiders, some hostile alien encounters. Nothing too exciting for a destroyer, but Veltari caught something in his tone. The way he said usual stuff made it sound like the humans dealt with dangerous situations regularly. She filed that thought away for later consideration. They reached the main research lab that the humans had prepared for them. It was spacious and well-equipped, with access to the ship's main systems. Through the large windows, they could see the red surface of Mars below. "We've prepared detailed technical manuals and system specifications," Jiwan said, handing Veltari a datapad. "Our engineers will be available to answer any questions you might have." Teclon examined some of the weapon controls nearby. "These kinetic cannons seem quite large. What kind of targets require such heavy firepower? You'd be surprised what you run into out there in deep space." Deho answered with a slight smile. "Better to have too much gun than not enough." As the humans left them to begin their research, Veltari noticed something strange. All three human officers had seemed genuinely friendly and helpful, but there was something else in their expressions. It almost looked like they were trying not to laugh, as if they knew a joke that the research team didn't understand yet. "Well," Zixara said, setting up her scanning equipment, "let's see what secrets these primitive humans are hiding." Veltari nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something completely unexpected. The humans had been too cooperative, too willing to share their military technology. In her experience, species only acted that way when they had nothing to fear from sharing their secrets. As they began their first scans of the ship's systems, Veltari wondered if the humans were really as simple as everyone believed. The next morning, Dr. Veltari and her team began their detailed examination of the human warship. They expected to finish their research within a few days. Most alien technologies were easy to understand once you knew the basic principles behind them. Dr. Zixara started with what looked like the simplest system, the ship's hull plating. She took small samples and ran them through her advanced molecular scanner. The results made her antenna droop with confusion. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, running the scan 3 more times. "According to my readings, this metal shouldn't exist." Veltari moved over to examine the data. The hull wasn't just steel or titanium like they expected. It was some kind of complex mixture that included elements her scanner couldn't identify. The atomic structure looked normal at first, but deeper analysis showed impossible patterns. Chief Engineer Kim Deho walked by and noticed their puzzled expressions. "Having trouble with something?" he asked politely. "Your hull material," Zixara said, showing him the scanner results. "What exactly is it made of?" Deho glanced at the readings and shrugged. "Oh, that's just our standard battle steel. We added some improvements over the years." "Nothing too fancy." "Improvements?" Veltari asked. "What kind of improvements?" "Well, we needed something that could handle different types of damage," Deho explained casually. "Energy weapons, kinetic impacts, radiation, extreme temperatures. You know, the usual combat conditions." He walked away, leaving the two scientists staring at each other. The usual combat conditions, he described, would destroy most known hull materials within minutes. Meanwhile, Commander Teclon was examining the ship's weapons. The humans called them railguns, which seemed simple enough. Kinetic weapons that used magnetic fields to shoot metal projectiles at high speed. His own people had used similar weapons centuries ago before developing energy-based systems. But when he tried to calculate the power requirements for these particular railguns, the numbers didn't work. The magnetic acceleration system needed more energy than the ship's power plant should be able to provide. Yet the weapons were clearly functional. "Lieutenant Choi," he called to a human officer passing by, "how do these railguns get enough power to function?" Lieutenant Choi Hyojin paused and looked at the weapon system. "Oh, those are connected to our main fusion reactors. But if we need extra power, we can tap into the backup antimatter generators." Teclon's scales changed color rapidly, showing extreme surprise. "Backup antimatter generators? How many power sources does this ship have?" "Let me think," Hyojin said, counting on her fingers. "Main fusion reactors, backup fusion units, antimatter generators, emergency fuel cells, and the quantum tap system for really extreme situations." She continued walking, leaving Teclon staring at the weapon controls. Most warships had one main power source and maybe one backup. This human destroyer had at least 5 different power systems, including some he'd never heard of. Engineer Kurian was having his own shocking discoveries in the engine room. He had expected to find basic fusion reactors, the kind most civilizations used for their first attempts at interstellar travel. Instead, he found fusion systems that were smaller and more efficient than anything his advanced people had ever built. How did you make them so compact? He asked Kim Daeho, who was checking some maintenance reports nearby. Took us a while to figure out the magnetic containment, Daeho replied. Had to develop some new materials that could handle the plasma temperatures. But these old reactors are actually pretty outdated now. Outdated? Kurian's mechanical voice box crackled with disbelief. These are more advanced than our newest designs. Really? Daeho looked genuinely surprised. Well, I guess different species develop technology in different ways. These are just our standard Mark 7 reactors. We've been using this design for about 8 years now. Kurian spent the next hour examining the fusion containment system. The magnetic field generators used principles that his people thought were impossible to achieve. The plasma temperatures were higher than anything they'd ever recorded. And according to Daeho, this was old technology that the humans considered outdated. Later that day, Dr. Veltari decided to examine the ship's defensive systems. She expected to find basic energy shields and maybe some armor plating. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about defensive technology. The ship had multiple shield systems that worked on completely different principles. There were energy barriers that could absorb laser fire, kinetic shields that stopped physical projectiles, and something called adaptive screens that automatically adjusted to different types of attacks. How do you power all these defensive systems? She asked Commander Park Ji-won. They're pretty efficient, Ji-won replied. Most of the time we only run 1 or 2 shield types. But if things get really dangerous, we can activate all defensive systems at once. All at once? Veltari couldn't hide her amazement. That would require enormous amounts of power. That's why we have multiple reactors, Ji-won explained. Plus, the adaptive screens actually generate some of their own power by converting incoming energy attacks. Pretty neat system. As the day continued, each team member made more disturbing discoveries. The ship's computer systems were quantum-based and could process information faster than most planetary networks. The life support systems could handle dozens of different atmospheric requirements and automatically adjust for alien crew members. The weapon systems included not just the railguns, but also energy cannons, missile launchers, and something called point defense clusters that could track and destroy hundreds of targets simultaneously. These point defense systems, Thekalon said to Lieutenant Choi, their reaction time is faster than our best combat computers. Yeah, they need to be quick, Choi replied. Some of the stuff we fight moves pretty fast. The targeting systems have to anticipate where threats will be, not just track where they are. What kind of threats move that fast? Thekalon asked. Choi paused for a moment as if deciding how much to say. Oh, you know, fast attack craft, smart missiles, that sort of thing. Space combat can get pretty hectic. But Thekalon noticed that her expression suggested she was talking about something much more dangerous than pirates or raiders. As evening approached, the research team gathered in their temporary lab to compare notes. Each of them had discovered technology that was decades more advanced than anything in the galactic database. This doesn't make sense, Zixara said, reviewing her data. According to our intelligence reports, humans are supposed to be a primitive species. Maybe our intelligence was wrong, Kurian suggested. But that raises an even bigger question. If humans have this level of technology, why do they let everyone think they're primitive? Veltari looked out the window at Mars. Human ships moved through space with a confidence that suggested they were very comfortable with dangerous situations. Maybe, she said slowly. We've been asking the wrong questions. What do you mean? Thekalon asked. We assumed humans were primitive because their technology looks crude from the outside, Veltari explained. But what if their technology only looks simple? What if they designed it that way on purpose? The team sat in uncomfortable silence, considering the implications. If humans were deliberately hiding their true capabilities, it meant they were far more sophisticated than anyone in the galaxy realized. And that raised an even more troubling question. If humans were this advanced, what were they preparing to fight against? On the third day of their research, Dr. Veltari decided they needed to examine the ship's computer databases. The advanced technology they had discovered made no sense unless they understood how humans had developed it so quickly. Captain Song Min-jae arrived that morning to grant them access to the ship's historical records. He was an older human with gray hair and tired eyes that seemed to have seen too much. You can review our operational logs and technical development files, he said. Petty Officer Han Jiho will supervise and help you navigate our systems. Han Jiho was young but had the same alert expression that Veltari had noticed in all the human crew members. He led them to the main computer core and began explaining the database structure. Most of our files are standard military records, Jiho said as he activated the displays. Mission logs, maintenance reports, crew evaluations. Nothing too exciting. But as Dr. Zixara began reading through the operational logs, her excitement quickly turned to confusion and then to fear. The missions described in these files were unlike anything she had seen before. What are void wraiths? She asked, pointing to a combat report from 2 years ago. Jiho glanced at the file and shrugged. Hostile entities we sometimes encounter in deep space. They're not from any known species. Pretty dangerous if you're not prepared for them. The report says you destroyed 12 of them. Zixara continued reading. It mentions they could phase through normal matter and attacked using psychic disruption fields. How is that possible? Space is a big place, Jiho replied casually. You run into all sorts of strange things out there. The void wraiths are just one type of hostile we deal with. Veltari moved to another terminal and found references to something called dimensional storms. According to the files, these were areas of space where normal physics stopped working. The reports described human ships operating in these regions using special equipment to maintain structural integrity. Your people fight battles in places where physics doesn't work? She asked incredulously. Not fight exactly, Jiho corrected. More like cleanup operations. Sometimes dangerous things come through the dimensional weaknesses. We have to stop them before they reach populated systems. Commander Theklan discovered files about the Convergence War that had apparently ended just 6 months before humans joined the Galactic Federation. The casualty reports were staggering. Millions of human military personnel killed fighting against something called the Devourers. Who were the Devourers? He asked. Jiho's expression became more serious. Ancient machines from outside our galaxy. They consumed entire star systems to fuel their expansion. We fought them for 15 years before finally pushing them back into deep space. 15 years? Theklan's scales flickered with shock. Why didn't you ask the Galactic Federation for help? We tried, Jiho said quietly. But by the time we could prove the threat was real, it was almost too late. The Federation Council decided it was too dangerous to get involved. So we handled it ourselves. Engineer Curien found technical specifications that made his mechanical brain struggle to process the information. The human ships were equipped with sensors that could detect subspace anomalies, weapons that functioned in null physics zones and shields that protected against temporal distortion attacks. These aren't theoretical technologies, he said, his voice box crackling with amazement. These are practical systems with maintenance schedules and replacement parts. Of course, Jiho replied. You can't fight exotic threats with normal equipment. We had to develop specialized gear pretty quickly. As the hours passed, the research team realized they had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. The human military wasn't just advanced. They were fighting wars against enemies that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know existed. Dr. Veltari found tactical databases containing detailed information about dozens of hostile species and entities. None of them were listed in any galactic catalog. The files described creatures that lived in the empty space between galaxies, machines that could manipulate time, and energy beings that fed on the life force of entire planets. How long have humans been fighting these things? She asked. Depends on what you mean by fighting, Jiho said thoughtfully. We've been encountering hostile entities since we first left our solar system about 70 years ago. But organized defense operations probably started around 50 years ago. 50 years. Zixara looked up from her research terminal. Humans have been in space for less than a century, and you've been fighting galactic-level threats for most of that time? Well, somebody had to, Jiho replied matter-of-factly. These things don't usually stop to ask if you're ready to deal with them. Theklan discovered that the ship's standard equipment included devices that could manipulate gravity, phase through solid matter, and repair themselves using ambient energy. The technology wasn't built through careful research over centuries. It was developed through desperate necessity during constant warfare. Your people built this technology because you needed it to survive, he said. More statement than question. Pretty much, Jiho agreed. When something can eat your ship from the inside out, you learn to build better defenses pretty quickly. When enemies can teleport through your shields, you develop new shield types. Necessity is a great teacher. Veltari found herself looking at star charts that showed human patrol routes extending far beyond official human territory. These weren't exploration missions or trade routes. They were defensive perimeters designed to intercept threats before they could reach populated systems. Your ship's patrol areas that are marked as absolutely lethal in our galactic navigation charts, she said. Those areas are only lethal if you're not prepared for what lives there, Jiho explained. We've learned how to operate safely in most hostile environments. It's all about having the right equipment and knowing what to expect. The most disturbing discovery came when Kurian accessed the ship's strategic planning files. He found detailed analyses of galactic defense capabilities, including assessments of every major species' military strength. The conclusions were terrifying. According to human analysis, most galactic civilizations would be completely helpless against the types of threats that humans fought regularly. Their advanced energy weapons were useless against entities that could absorb energy. Their beautiful crystal ships would shatter when faced with enemies that attacked on multiple dimensional levels. You've been protecting us, Veltari said suddenly, the full truth hitting her like a physical blow. All this time, while we thought you were primitive, you've been standing between us and things that could destroy our entire civilization. Jiho was quiet for a long moment. That's not exactly how we see it, he said finally. We're not trying to be heroes. We're just dealing with problems as they come up. It happens that a lot of these problems would affect other species if we didn't handle them. But why keep it secret? Zixara asked. Why let everyone think you're primitive? Because panic doesn't help anyone, Jiho replied. If the galaxy knew what was really out there, every species would either hide in their home systems or waste resources trying to fight threats they're not equipped to handle. This way, people can live their lives while we deal with the dangerous stuff. As the day ended, the research team sat in their lab trying to process what they had learned. They had come to study primitive human technology, and instead discovered that humanity was the galaxy's secret guardian, fighting wars against cosmic horrors to protect civilizations that didn't even know they were in danger. The worst part was realizing how fragile their peaceful existence really was. Without human protection, the beautiful galactic civilization they knew and loved would have been destroyed long ago by threats from the dark spaces between stars. What do we do with this information? Teclon asked quietly. Veltari looked out at the human ships moving through space with their constant, vigilant patrols. I don't know, she admitted. I honestly don't know. On the final day of their research, Dr. Veltari and her team faced a decision that would change not just their lives, but the entire galaxy's future. They sat in their temporary lab surrounded by data that revealed humanity's true nature as the galaxy's secret guardian's commander. Lee Minho arrived for what he called the final briefing. He looked different now, less like a diplomatic representative and more like the military commander he really was. Captain Song Minjae and the other human officers accompanied him, their casual friendliness replaced by serious expressions. You've seen our files, Minho said without preamble. You understand what humanity really is and what we've been doing for the past 50 years. Now we need to talk about why we let you see all of this. Dr. Veltari felt her antenna droop with dread. You didn't just allow this research. You planned it, we did, Minho confirmed. The galactic scientific community is respected and trusted. When you publish your findings, people will believe you in ways they wouldn't believe official human government statements. Dr. Zixara looked up from the datapad she had been studying. You want us to tell everyone the truth about the threats you've been fighting. Some of the truth, Captain Song corrected. The parts that matter for what's coming next. Minho activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy from above. Red markers indicated known hostile activity, yellow showed areas under human patrol, and green represented peaceful civilized space. The ratio was terrifying. Red and yellow zones outnumbered green areas by at least 3-1. This is the current situation, Minho explained, but our deep space monitoring networks have detected something that changes everything. The display zoomed out to show the empty void beyond the galaxy's edge. Massive energy signatures moved through the darkness, not individual ships or creatures, but what looked like entire fleets of unknown entities heading toward their galaxy. What are they? Commander Teclon asked, his scales flickering with fear. We call them the Convergence, Song replied. Based on our analysis, they're a collection of the most dangerous entities from multiple galaxies that have been consumed over the past million years. They're organized, intelligent, and they're coming here. Engineer Curian's mechanical systems whirred as he processed the implications.
How long do we have?
18 months, maybe 24, Minho said. Not long enough for any species to develop the technology needed to fight them, but possibly long enough to prepare if we work together. The research team stared at the display in horror. The approaching fleet was larger than anything they could have imagined. Veltari realized that every threat humanity had fought over the past 50 years had been preparation for this moment. "You've known this was coming," she said. "We suspected," Song admitted. "The pattern of hostile activity has been increasing for decades. The types of entities we encounter have been getting more sophisticated. Something was driving them toward our galaxy." "And you didn't warn anyone?" Zixara asked, her voice sharp with accusation. "Warn them of what?" Minho replied. "That cosmic horrors from beyond the galaxy were coming to destroy everything they love? What exactly would that have accomplished besides creating galaxy-wide panic? People have a right to know when they're in danger," Theklan protested. "People have a right to live their lives without constant terror," Song countered. "But now that's no longer an option. The convergence is too big for humanity to handle alone. We need allies who understand what we're fighting and why." Veltari studied the tactical projections on the display. Even with their advanced technology and 50 years of combat experience, humanity's chances against the convergence looked grim. But the other galactic species, with their elegant energy weapons and crystal ships, would be slaughtered within hours. "What do you need from us?" she asked quietly. "Tell the truth," Minho said simply. "Publish your research. Let the galaxy know that humanity isn't a primitive species that got lucky. Show them what we've really been doing out here. Help them understand that the threats are real and that we need to work together." "And then what?" Curian asked. "Even if other species believe us, how can they help? Their technology isn't designed for this kind of warfare." "Every species has something to contribute," Song explained. "The Altari have the best shield technology in the galaxy. We could adapt it for anti-exotic defenses. The Void Dancers understand energy manipulation better than anyone. They could help develop new weapons. Your people's mechanical expertise could help us build automated defense systems. But the real advantage," Minho added, "is numbers. Humanity has maybe 10,000 combat-ready ships. The entire galactic navy, if we could coordinate it properly, has over 1 million vessels. Even primitive weapons can be effective if you have enough of them." Dr. Veltari realized the terrible burden they were being asked to carry. If they published their findings, they would shatter the galaxy's sense of security and reveal that their peaceful existence had been an illusion. Billions of people would learn that monsters from beyond the stars were coming to destroy everything they loved. But if they didn't publish their findings, those same billions would die unprepared when the convergence arrived. "There's something else," Song said, his expression becoming even more grim. "Humanity has been fighting this war for 50 years, but we're tired. We've lost too many ships, too many people. Even if we survive the convergence, we can't keep protecting the galaxy forever. Other species need to learn how to defend themselves." "You're asking us to end the galaxy's innocence," Zixara said softly. "We're asking you to help the galaxy grow up," Minho replied, "because children don't survive what's coming." The research team spent the next few hours reviewing their options. They could classify their findings and keep humanity's secrets, preserving the galaxy's peace for a few more months until the convergence arrived. Or they could publish everything and watch civilizations across the galaxy struggle to comprehend threats they had never imagined. As evening approached, Veltari made her decision. "We'll publish our research," she said, "but we'll do it carefully. We'll start with the technology discoveries and gradually reveal the larger truth. Give people time to adjust. Time is something we don't have much of," Song warned. "Then we'll work as fast as we can," Veltari replied. "But if we're going to ask the galaxy to face cosmic horrors, we need to help them understand gradually. Shock them too much and they'll just freeze with terror." As they prepared to leave the UES Indomitable, the human officers gathered to see them off. The casual friendliness had returned, but now the research team understood what lay beneath it. The constant awareness of threats lurking in the darkness, the weight of protecting others who couldn't protect themselves, the quiet determination to stand against impossible odds. "Thank you," Captain Song said as they reached the airlock. "For listening, for understanding, and for choosing to help." "Thank you," Veltari replied, "for 50 years of standing between us and the dark." As their shuttle pulled away from the human destroyer, the research team looked back at the ship with new eyes. They had come expecting to study primitive technology, and instead learned that humanity was the galaxy's shield against chaos. The UES Indomitable and ships like it had been fighting monsters in the void, while everyone else lived in peaceful ignorance. But that ignorance was about to end. The galaxy would soon learn what lurked in the spaces between stars, what humanity had been fighting, and what was coming for them all. Captain Song's final words echoed in their minds as they headed home. "The next time you see a human warship, remember, we're not the threat you should be worried about." Within weeks, their research would be published across the galaxy. Civilizations would struggle to comprehend the truth about humanity and the threats they faced. Some would refuse to believe it. Others would panic. But hopefully enough would stand up and fight. Because in 18 months the convergence would arrive and the galaxy's age of innocence would end forever. When that day came, humanity would not stand alone against the darkness. They would have allies who finally understood what they were fighting for. Not just territory or resources, but the right of all civilized beings to exist in the light. The research team had come to study a human warship. Instead, they had learned what it truly meant to be human, to stand against impossible odds, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to never surrender in the face of cosmic horror. Now it was time for the rest of the galaxy to learn the same lesson. The fourth day brought revelations that shattered everything the research team thought they knew about the galaxy. Chief Petty Officer Nam Soo-jin arrived to help them access the ship's classified strategic archives. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that seemed to calculate threat levels in everyone she met. "Captain Song decided you should see the full picture," Soo-jin said as she unlocked security protocols. "Fair warning, though, some of this information might be disturbing." Dr. Veltari had thought nothing could disturb her more than what they had already discovered. She was wrong. The strategic archives contained detailed files on every known hostile entity in their section of the galaxy, and far beyond. The database was massive, with thousands of entries describing creatures, machines, and phenomena that existed in the dark spaces between civilized worlds. "How many different types of threats are there?" Dr. Zixara asked, scrolling through endless categories. "We've cataloged about 4,000 distinct hostile types," Soo-jin replied casually, "but we encounter new ones every few months. The universe is a creative place when it comes to things that want to kill you." Zixara's antenna trembled as she read descriptions of entities that could consume entire star systems, machines that converted living beings into raw materials, and energy parasites that fed on the life force of planets. Each entry included detailed tactical information about how to fight them. "You have specific combat strategies for all of these?" she asked weakly. "Of course," Soo-jin said. "You can't fight something effectively unless you understand how it operates. Every hostile type has weaknesses if you know where to look." Commander Theclon discovered that human space wasn't just territory they had claimed for expansion. It was a carefully designed buffer zone, positioned to intercept threats emerging from the galactic core and the empty spaces beyond. Human colonies were actually military outposts disguised as civilian settlements. Your entire civilization is organized around defending against these threats, he realized. Not our entire civilization, Soo-jin corrected. Maybe 60% of our space-based population is involved in defense operations. The rest are genuine civilians living normal lives. We try to keep the dangerous stuff away from them. Engineer Curian found technical analyses that explained why human technology looked so crude compared to other galactic species. Their weapons and defenses were specifically designed to be effective against the exotic threats they faced regularly. Your kinetic weapons work because most cosmic entities are vulnerable to physical impact, he said, understanding dawning in his mechanical voice. Energy weapons just make some of them stronger. Exactly, Soo-jin nodded approvingly. A lot of the nasties out there can absorb or redirect energy attacks, but it's hard to absorb a chunk of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed. The human ships looked crude because they were built like fortresses, designed to survive attacks that would destroy the elegant vessels favored by more advanced species. Every aspect of human technology prioritized function over beauty, effectiveness over sophistication. Dr. Veltari accessed intelligence reports that made her blood freeze. Several natural disasters that had destroyed entire systems over the past century weren't natural at all. They were hostile entities that humanity had eliminated before they could spread to populated regions. The Kepler supernova 15 years ago, she said, reading one report. That wasn't a stellar collapse. That was you destroying something. A devourer breeding facility, Sujin confirmed. They were using the star's energy to produce millions of attack units. We had to stop them before they finished. But the explosion killed billions of people on nearby worlds, Veltari protested. Sujin's expression became grim. The alternative was watching them consume half the galaxy. Sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones. The research team learned that humanity's classification as Class C wasn't an oversight or mistake. It was deliberate misdirection. Human diplomats actively encouraged other species to underestimate them because it made their real job easier. When enemies expected primitive weapons and simple tactics, they were completely unprepared for humanity's actual capabilities. When other species thought humans were weak, they didn't interfere with military operations against cosmic threats. You've been lying to everyone, Teclon said, his scales showing betrayal and confusion. We've been protecting everyone, Sujin replied firmly, including protecting them from knowledge that would destroy their ability to live normal lives. Zexara discovered records of human vessels operating in regions of space that were considered absolutely impossible to survive. The ships moved through areas where space itself was unstable, where time flowed backward, where the basic forces of physics had been twisted by ancient catastrophes. How do you survive in places like this? She asked, showing Sujin a mission report from something called the Broken Zone. Specialized equipment, careful planning, and a lot of luck, Sujin answered. Plus, someone has to monitor these areas. If something dangerous comes out of them, we need to know as quickly as possible. The team realized that humanity's patrol routes covered not just human space, but vast areas beyond any official territorial claims. Human ships ranged far into unexplored regions, seeking out and destroying threats before other species even knew they existed. You're not just defending human space, Veltari said. You're defending the entire galaxy. We're defending our neighborhood, Sujin corrected. It just happens that our neighborhood is pretty big, and a lot of our neighbors don't know how dangerous their neighborhood really is. Kurian found loss reports that detailed the true cost of humanity's secret war. Over the past 50 years, humans had lost millions of military personnel and thousands of ships fighting threats that other species had never heard of. The casualty rates were staggering, but humanity kept fighting. Why? He asked simply. Why sacrifice so much for people who don't even know you're protecting them? Sujin was quiet for a long moment. Because someone has to, she said finally. And we're the ones who are good at it. The most shocking discovery came when Veltari accessed recent threat assessments. According to human intelligence, several new types of hostile entities were emerging from beyond the galactic rim. These weren't random monsters or ancient weapons. They were organized, intelligent, and far more dangerous than anything humanity had faced before. Something is coming, she said, reading the classified reports. Something big. Multiple somethings, actually, Sujin confirmed. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive movement in the void between galaxies. Whatever is out there, it's heading in our direction. The research team sat in stunned silence as they realized the full scope of what was happening. Humanity hadn't just been fighting random threats for 50 years. They had been preparing for something much worse. All their advanced technology, all their military development, all their sacrifice had been building toward a conflict that could determine the fate of the entire galaxy. The other species, Teclon said slowly. They're not ready for this, are they? No, Sujin admitted. Most galactic civilizations have never fought anything more dangerous than pirates or territorial disputes. They've lived in peace for so long that they've forgotten how to fight real wars. And when these new threats arrive, Veltari asked. Sujin's expression was grim but determined. Then humanity will do what we've always done. We'll stand between the monsters and everyone else. But this time, we're going to need help. The research team finally understood why they had been allowed to see all this classified information. Humanity needed allies who understood what they were really facing. The comfortable fiction of human primitiveness had to end because the wars ahead would require the galaxy's combined strength. But With that knowledge came a terrible burden, understanding that their peaceful civilizations had only existed because humans stood between them and horrors from the dark spaces beyond the stars. As the day ended, Veltari looked out at the human ships moving through space with their constant vigilant patrols. They weren't just vessels of war. They were the thin line that separated civilization from chaos, light from darkness, hope from despair. And soon, that line was going to be tested like never before.